The small scar above Elena's left eyebrow had always been dismissed as a workplace accident from her years maintaining aircraft engines. But when the encrypted radio transmission crackled through the maintenance bay that cold February morning, revealing her call sign Ghost Rider in a hostile intercept, everyone realized that scar wasn't from a wrench slipping on metal. It was from shrapnel during a classified mission over the Balkans. And now the enemy knew exactly who had been hiding in plain sight for the past 8 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pre-dawn darkness at Ramstein Air Base in Germany was broken only by the harsh fluorescent lights flooding Hangar 7. Technical Sergeant Elena Rodriguez had been the first to arrive, just as she had every morning for the past 8 years. Her steel-toed boots echoed against the concrete floor as she made her way to the tool cabinet, methodically checking each wrench, each diagnostic device, each piece of equipment that would help her maintain the fleet of C-130 Hercules transport aircraft under her care. At 36, Elena had built a reputation as the most thorough and reliable aircraft mechanic on the base. Her colleagues respected her methodical approach to troubleshooting complex mechanical issues, her ability to work 18-hour shifts without complaint, and her uncanny intuition for detecting problems before they became catastrophic failures. She was average height, with calloused hands that spoke of years working with heavy machinery, her auburn hair consistently pulled back in a regulation bun, and her green eyes that seemed to analyze everything with the precision of a diagnostic computer. The other mechanics called her the Professor because of her encyclopedic knowledge of aircraft systems. She could recite technical specifications from memory, diagnose engine problems by sound alone, and had never missed a critical maintenance deadline in her entire tenure at Ramstein. Her small apartment off base was sparse and functional, decorated only with civilian aviation magazines and a few photos of vintage aircraft. To everyone who knew her, Elena Rodriguez was exactly what she appeared to be, a dedicated, skilled, and somewhat solitary aircraft technician who had found her calling in the intricate world of military aviation maintenance. Master Sergeant Thompson, the hangar supervisor, had grown to depend on Elena's expertise more than he cared to admit. When complex mechanical failures stumped other technicians, Thompson would inevitably find himself saying, "Get Rodriguez to take a look at it." She had an unusual habit of spending extra time in the cockpits during maintenance checks, familiarizing herself with flight controls and instrumentation far beyond what her job required. When questioned about this, she would simply explain that understanding how pilots interfaced with the aircraft helped her better maintain the systems they depended on. The morning routine never varied. Elena would arrive at 0445 hours, 45 minutes before the official start of her shift. She would spend the first 30 minutes reviewing maintenance logs from the previous day, checking weather reports that might affect scheduled flights, and preparing her workspace with the meticulous attention to detail that had become her trademark. By the time other personnel began arriving, she would already be deep into her first inspection of the day, moving through each aircraft with the systematic thoroughness of someone who understood that lives depended on her work. Her colleagues had learned not to interrupt Elena during these early morning routines. She worked with a focused intensity that seemed to block out everything except the immediate task at hand. The sounds of hydraulic systems, the hum of electrical components, the subtle vibrations that indicate proper engine function, she absorbed all of these details with an almost supernatural awareness that consistently impressed her supervisors and peers. What they didn't know was that Elena's exceptional mechanical skills were actually her secondary expertise. The countless hours she spent studying aircraft systems, the way she instinctively understood flight dynamics, the reason she could predict mechanical failures before they occurred wasn't just because she was a gifted technician. It was because she had spent the previous 15 years of her career as one of the most decorated combat transport pilots in the United States Air Force Special Operations Command. From 2001 to 2016, Captain Elena Rodriguez had flown some of the most dangerous missions in military aviation. She had delivered special operations teams deep into hostile territory, executed emergency evacuations under enemy fire, and navigated through weather conditions that would have grounded less experienced pilots. Her call sign, Ghost Rider, had been earned during a classified mission in Afghanistan when she successfully infiltrated enemy airspace at night, delivered critical supplies to surrounded forces, and extracted wounded personnel without being detected by sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems. Her service record, buried deep in classified military databases, told a story of exceptional courage and skill. 78 combat missions across 3 different theaters of operation, 3 distinguished flying crosses, 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star with Valor device. She had been recommended for promotion to Major twice, and both times had requested to remain at the captain level so she could continue flying operational missions rather than being moved to a staff position. The transition from pilot to mechanic hadn't been Elena's choice. In 2016, a combination of new military policies and a series of budget cuts had resulted in significant downsizing of Special Operations Aviation units. Elena, along with dozens of other experienced pilots, had been given options: accept reassignment to conventional transport units, move to staff positions, or leave active duty. She had chosen a 4th option that wasn't officially offered. She had requested voluntary demotion and retraining as an aircraft mechanic. The request had been so unusual that it had required approval from the Pentagon. Elena's justification had been simple. She wanted to continue serving, she wanted to remain close to aircraft, and she believed her pilot experience would make her a better mechanic. What she hadn't mentioned in her official request was that she was exhausted by 15 years of combat operations, that she needed time to process experiences that had fundamentally changed her, and that working with aircraft systems felt like a form of therapy that kept her connected to flying without the constant stress of life-or-death missions. The retraining had been surprisingly easy. Her pilot background gave her an intuitive understanding of how aircraft systems work together, and her perfectionist personality translated perfectly to the detail-oriented world of aviation maintenance. Within 2 years, she had earned specialist certifications in hydraulics, avionics, and power plant maintenance. By her 4th year at Ramstein, she was considered one of the most knowledgeable mechanics on the base. Elena had been careful to compartmentalize her past completely. Her personnel file at Ramstein contained only information about her mechanical training and civilian certifications. Her previous military service was listed simply as administrative support, with no details about her actual duties or achievements. She had requested that her combat decorations be removed from her visible service record, and she had deliberately chosen to serve at a base where none of her former colleagues were stationed. The few personal belongings in her apartment gave no indication of her previous life. The vintage aircraft photos were deliberately chosen to reflect civilian aviation rather than military operations. She subscribed to popular aviation magazines rather than professional military publications. She had even gone so far to develop civilian hobbies, woodworking, hiking, and photography that had nothing to do with aviation, creating a plausible backstory for anyone who might become curious about her background. For 8 years, the deception had been perfect. Elena Rodriguez, the dedicated aircraft mechanic, had become a completely authentic identity. She genuinely enjoyed the work, took pride in maintaining aircraft to the highest standards, and had built genuine friendships with her colleagues based on shared professional interests rather than fabricated personal history. She had found a way to continue serving while healing from years of combat stress, and she had convinced herself that this quiet, stable life was exactly what she needed. But on that February morning, as she performed routine maintenance on C-130's tail number 840208, everything was about to change. The encrypted radio in the maintenance bay, normally used only for coordinating flight operations, began broadcasting an intercepted enemy transmission that would shatter 8 years of carefully constructed anonymity and thrust Elena back into a world she thought she had left behind forever. The encrypted radio transmission began as routine chatter, the kind of background noise that typically filled the maintenance hangar during operational hours. Elena was 3 levels deep into a hydraulic system diagnostic when the familiar cadence of military communications caught her attention. She paused, wrench in hand, listening to what should have been standard flight coordination between the control tower and incoming aircraft. But something was wrong. The transmission patterns were off, the frequencies slightly different from normal base communications. Elena's trained ear, honed by years of monitoring enemy communications during combat missions, immediately recognized the subtle inconsistencies that indicated this wasn't coming from friendly forces. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, working on avionics 2 aircrafts down, noticed Elena's sudden stillness. "Rodriguez, you catch that transmission?" he called out, wiping hydraulic fluid from his hands. Elena didn't respond immediately. She was listening with the focused intensity that had spent years interpreting hostile communications in war zones. The transmission was in English, but the syntax patterns, the slight accent bleeding through in the speaker's attempt at American pronunciation, and most importantly, the tactical terminology being used, all pointed to one disturbing conclusion. This was enemy intelligence, and they were broadcasting from somewhere close enough to override base communications. "Chen, keep working," Elena said quietly, her voice carefully controlled. "I'm going to check with communications about that signal." She made her way toward the communication station at the far end of the hangar, but her real goal was to get closer to the main radio array where she could better analyze the transmission. As she approached, the voice came through again, clearer this time, and Elena felt her blood freeze. "Confirm identity, Ghost Rider stationed at Ramstein Air Base. Target verification in progress. Operational history includes Balkans insertion 2008, Syria extraction 2011, Afghanistan deep reconnaissance 2014. Current assignment, aircraft maintenance, Hangar 7. Recommend immediate action." Elena's hand instinctively moved. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Before Elena could respond, the transmission resumed, this time with additional details that made her realize the full scope of the threat they were facing. Ghost Rider confirmed an active target. Intelligence indicates the subject maintains advanced tactical training despite cover assignment. Base security assessment shows vulnerability in eastern perimeter. Hangar 7 proximity optimal for extraction operation. Timeline accelerated due to recent Syrian asset compromise. Execute within 48 hours. Elena's mind raced through tactical possibilities. Enemy forces weren't just aware of her identity. They had been conducting surveillance of Ramstein Air Base, mapping security vulnerabilities, and planning some kind of extraction operation. The reference to Syrian asset compromise suggested this was connected to operations she had been involved in years earlier, missions where she had disrupted enemy supply lines and extracted high-value targets. She needed to alert base security immediately, but she also knew that revealing her awareness of the transmission would inevitably lead to questions about how a maintenance technician had recognized hostile communications patterns and decoded military intelligence terminology that should have been meaningless to someone with her official background. "Walsh, I'm going to run a diagnostic on the radio array," Elena said. "Been getting some feedback on the maintenance frequencies." Patricia nodded and returned to her routine communications monitoring, unaware that Elena was now systematically scanning frequencies to determine the source of the enemy transmission. Elena's pilot training had included electronic warfare and communications intelligence, skills that were supposedly irrelevant to aircraft maintenance but were now critical to understanding the threat facing the base. As she worked, Elena isolated the transmission source to a location approximately 8 kilometers southeast of the base. Close enough for real-time surveillance, but far enough to avoid routine patrols. The equipment being used was sophisticated, military-grade, which suggested this wasn't a lone wolf operation, but rather a coordinated intelligence effort with significant resources. The next transmission provided even more disturbing information. Phase 1 surveillance complete. Subject maintains predictable routine. Arrives Hangar 7 at 0445 daily. Works alone for the first 30 minutes. Security presence is minimal during early hours. Recommend insertion team deploy Thursday 0430 hours. Extraction via Eastern Maintenance Road, minimal exposure time. Elena realized with growing alarm that enemy forces had been watching her for weeks, possibly months. They knew her daily routine down to the minute, had mapped her movements, and were planning an operation that would occur in less than 36 hours. Whatever they wanted from her, they were prepared to take significant risks to get it. Master Sergeant Thompson appeared at Elena's shoulder, causing her to nearly jump out of her skin. Her reaction was so uncharacteristic that Thompson immediately noticed. "Rodriguez, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Elena forced herself to remain calm, but her mind was working through multiple scenarios simultaneously. She needed to warn base security without revealing how she had obtained the intelligence. She needed to figure out why enemy forces wanted her specifically. And she needed to do all of this without compromising the identity she had worked so hard to construct over the past 8 years. "Thompson, I think we might have a communications security issue," she said carefully. "Been picking up some unusual transmissions that don't match our normal frequency assignments." Thompson frowned. "What kind of transmissions?" Before Elena could respond, the enemy communications resumed, with details that made her blood run cold. "Confirm Ghost Rider tactical value. Subject responsible for compromising Sarajevo weapons cache 2008. Extracted 3 high-value targets from Damascus 2011. Disrupted supply operations Kandahar Province 2014. Current intelligence access unknown, but potential operational knowledge critical for ongoing operations. Capture priority Alpha." Elena realized that enemy forces weren't just aware of her identity. They wanted her because of specific operations she had conducted years earlier. Missions that had apparently caused significant damage to enemy networks. Operations that were still having strategic impact nearly a decade later. The weapons cache in Sarajevo had contained advanced surface-to-air missiles that were destined for terrorist organizations. The Damascus extraction had pulled out intelligence assets who had provided critical information about enemy leadership. The Kandahar operations had disrupted drug funding for insurgent activities. "Thompson," Elena said quietly, "we need to contact base security immediately. I think we have a serious problem." But as she spoke, Elena realized that the enemy communications had stopped. The frequencies were now broadcasting only normal base communications. Either the hostile forces had completed their intelligence gathering, or they had detected her attempts to monitor their communications. In either case, the immediate threat has just escalated significantly. Thompson was looking at her with growing concern. "Rodriguez, what exactly did you hear?" Elena faced a moment of truth. She could continue maintaining her cover identity and try to warn security through official channels, risking that the threat wouldn't be taken seriously or acted upon quickly enough. Or she could reveal enough of her background to ensure that the base would be prepared for what was coming, knowing that doing so would end 8 years of carefully constructed anonymity. The decision was made for her when her enhanced hearing, trained through years of combat operations, picked up the subtle sound of diesel engines in the distance, engines that were running at night when they should have been silent, coming from the direction where she had traced the enemy transmissions. "Thompson," Elena said, her voice taking on a command authority that Thompson had never heard from her before. "We need to implement base security protocols immediately. We have hostile forces conducting active surveillance, and they're planning an operation for tomorrow morning." Thompson stared at her in confusion. "Rodriguez, how could you possibly know that?" Elena looked at her supervisor, this man who had trusted her mechanical expertise for years, and realized that her 8-year respite from the world of combat operations was about to come to an abrupt end. "Thompson, because they're not here for Elena Rodriguez, the aircraft mechanic. They're here for someone I used to be, and if we don't act fast, people are going to die." Master Sergeant Thompson's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as Elena's words hung in the air between them. 8 years of working along someone he thought he knew completely had just been shattered by a single sentence that suggested everything about Elena Rodriguez had been carefully constructed fiction. "Rodriguez, what the hell are you talking about?"
Thompson's voice carried the edge of someone who was beginning to realize that a situation was spiraling far beyond his understanding. Someone you used to be. You're an aircraft mechanic. You've been working maintenance here for 8 years. Elena took a deep breath, knowing that once she crossed this line, there would be no going back to the quiet anonymity she had built around herself. But the sound of those distant diesel engines was getting closer, and she could hear subtle changes in the base's normal nighttime patterns that suggested hostile forces were already moving into position. "Thompson," Elena said, her voice taking on a command authority that Thompson had never heard from her before. "We need to implement base security protocols immediately. We have hostile forces conducting active surveillance, and they're planning an operation for tomorrow morning." Thompson stared at her in confusion. "Rodriguez, how could you possibly know that?" Elena looked at her supervisor, this man who had trusted her mechanical expertise for years, and realized that her 8-year respite from the world of combat operations was about to come to an abrupt end. "Because, Thompson, they're not here for Elena Rodriguez, the aircraft mechanic. They're here for someone I used to be, and if we don't act fast, people are going to die." Master Sergeant Thompson's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as Elena's words hung in the air between them. 8 years of working along someone he thought he knew completely had just been shattered by a single sentence that suggested everything about Elena Rodriguez had been carefully constructed fiction. "Rodriguez, what the hell are you talking about?" Thompson's voice carried the edge of someone who was beginning to realize that a situation was spiraling far beyond his understanding. "Someone you used to be. You're an aircraft mechanic. You've been working maintenance here for 8 years. Elena took a deep breath, knowing that once she crossed this line, there would be no going back to the quiet anonymity she had built around herself. But the sound of those distant diesel engines was getting closer, and she could hear subtle changes in the base's normal nighttime patterns that suggested hostile forces were already moving into position. "Thompson," Elena said, her voice taking on a command authority that Thompson had never heard from her before. "We need to implement base security protocols immediately. We have hostile forces conducting active surveillance, and they're planning an operation for tomorrow morning." Thompson stared at her in confusion. "Rodriguez, how could you possibly—"
Elena Rodriguez, Staff Sergeant, United States Air Force Special Operations Command. She spoke into the secure communications device. Authorization code Tango 7 Alpha Niner Charlie 2. Requesting immediate contact with Colonel Bradford, Priority Alpha Classification. The response was immediate and electrifying. "Ghost Rider, this is Command. Your authorization codes show inactive status as of 2016. Please explain your current situation." Thompson felt his knees go weak. Ghost Rider. He had heard that call sign before, whispered in the kind of conversations that stopped when enlisted personnel walked by. Ghost Rider was legendary among special operations aviation, a pilot who had pulled off impossible missions, someone whose actual identity was classified at the highest levels. "Command, this is Ghost Rider. I'm currently stationed at Ramstein under deep cover assignment. We have immediate hostile intelligence indicating a planned extraction operation targeting my position. Request emergency security support and tactical consultation." Within 60 seconds, the hangar was flooded with security personnel. Colonel Bradford himself arrived with a team of intelligence officers, moving with the kind of urgent precision that indicated they had been preparing for this possibility for years. Elena realized that her cover assignment hadn't been as unofficial as she had believed. Command had been keeping track of her location all along. "Captain Rodriguez," Colonel Bradford said, using the rank that Elena hadn't heard applied to herself in 8 years. "We've been monitoring chatter about a potential operation targeting former Special Ops personnel. We weren't sure if you were on the list." "I'm definitely on the list, sir," Elena replied, falling naturally back into military bearing that Thompson had never seen from her before. "They have detailed intelligence about my operational history, my current routine, and they're planning insertion tomorrow at 0430 hours. Colonel Bradford nodded grimly. "We intercepted fragments of communications about Ghost Rider, but we couldn't confirm the target. How much do they know about your current capabilities?" Elena considered the question carefully. They know my historical operational record, but they may assume my current assignment has degraded my tactical readiness. That could be an advantage. Master Sergeant Thompson, still trying to process the transformation he was witnessing, finally found his voice. "Sir, with all due respect, Captain Rodriguez, has been working aircraft maintenance for 8 years. How exactly is that tactically relevant?" Elena and Colonel Bradford exchanged glances, and Elena realized that her supervisor deserved an explanation that went beyond classification levels and operational secrecy. "Thompson, the past 8 years haven't been downtime," Elena said. "Every day I've been maintaining aircraft, I've also been maintaining skills. I know every aircraft on this base inside and out, not just the mechanical systems, but their tactical capabilities, their performance limitations, their potential as platforms for defensive operations. I've been studying base security, traffic patterns, and vulnerability assessments. The enemy thinks they're extracting a pilot who's been out of the game for 8 years. They're actually targeting someone who's been preparing for 8 years." Intelligence Officer Major Sarah Kim stepped forward with a tablet, displaying satellite imagery. "Captain, we've identified their staging area approximately 8 kilometers southeast of here. 3 vehicles, estimated 12 to 15 personnel, sophisticated communications equipment. They're not taking any chances." Elena studied the imagery with the analytical eye that had made her one of the most effective special operations pilots in the Air Force. Vehicle positioning, terrain analysis, approach routes, extraction possibilities. Her mind automatically began calculating tactical variables that had nothing to do with aircraft maintenance and everything to do with combat operations. "They're using the industrial access road for insertion," she observed, pointing to the satellite image. "Smart choice. Minimal security coverage, direct route to Hangar 7, multiple escape routes if the operation goes wrong. But they're making assumptions about base response time that might not be accurate." Colonel Bradford leaned closer to examine Elena's analysis. "What do you mean?" "They're planning this like Ramstein is a standard military installation with predictable security protocols. They don't realize that housing former special ops personnel changes the entire defensive equation. They expect a maintenance technician. They're going to encounter something very different." Elena moved to the tactical planning station and began sketching defensive positions with the kind of rapid precision that revealed years of mission planning experience. Her transformation from quiet mechanic to tactical analyst was so complete that Thompson felt like he was meeting Elena Rodriguez for the first time. "Sir, recommend we let them initiate the operation as planned," Elena continued. "But instead of a soft target, we provide them with a controlled engagement that allows us to capture intelligence about their network while neutralizing the immediate threat." Major Kim looked skeptical. "Captain, that's an extremely high-risk approach. We're talking about you as bait for a hostile extraction team." Elena smiled, and for the first time in 8 years, it was the confident smile of someone who was operating in her element rather than hiding from it. "Major, respectfully, I've been bait for hostile extraction teams before. The difference is that this time I get to choose the terrain, the timing, and the tactical response. 8 years ago, I would have been operating alone in enemy territory. Tomorrow morning, I'll have the entire resources of Ramstein Air Base supporting the operation." Colonel Bradford studied Elena's tactical analysis, then looked at her with the kind of respect that indicated he was remembering exactly why Ghost Rider had been one of the most decorated pilots in special operations. "Captain Rodriguez, are you requesting permission to engage hostile forces?" Elena looked around the hangar that had been her home for 8 years, at the aircraft she had maintained with such careful attention, at Thompson, who was still trying to reconcile the mechanic he knew with the combat veteran standing before her. Then she looked back at Colonel Bradford. "Sir, I'm requesting permission to finish what they started when they decided to hunt down American service members. They want Ghost Rider? Tomorrow morning, they're going to get exactly what they asked for." Thompson shook his head in amazement. 8 years. 8 years you've been fixing hydraulic systems and troubleshooting avionics, and you've actually been preparing, Elena finished. "Thompson, every day I spent learning these aircraft systems, every hour I spent understanding base operations, every routine I established, it was all preparation for something I hoped would never happen. But now that it's happening, I'm ready in ways that enemy intelligence never anticipated."
Colonel Bradford began issuing orders for tactical teams, air support, and intelligence coordination. As Elena watched the familiar rhythm of operational planning unfold around her, she realized that 8 years of hiding had actually been 8 years of training for this exact moment. The quiet aircraft mechanic was about to become Ghost Rider again, but this time with advantages she had never possessed during her years of combat flying. Complete knowledge of the battlefield, unlimited support resources, and an enemy who had no idea what they were really walking into. The Tactical Operations Center that had been hastily established in the Ramstein Air Base Command Building buzzed with controlled intensity as intelligence officers, security personnel, and special operations planners worked through the night to prepare for the morning's engagement. Elena found herself at the center of it all, her 8 years of mechanical expertise now being translated into tactical advantages that even she hadn't fully realized she possessed. Captain David Walsh from Base Intelligence spread detailed architectural plans of Hangar 7 across the main planning table. Ghost Rider, walk us through the physical environment. We need to understand every advantage and vulnerability.
Elena studied the blueprints with fresh eyes, seeing the maintenance facility not as her workplace, but as a battlefield. The hangar has 3 primary entry points, but the eastern maintenance door is the most logical insertion point. It's closest to their staging area and provides the best cover during approach. The aircraft positioning creates natural corridors and choke points. She traced her finger along the blueprint, identifying tactical features that months of routine maintenance had etched into her memory. C-130 tail number 91-1505 is positioned here, undergoing engine overhaul. The port engine cowling is removed, creating a blind spot approximately 12 feet wide. Aircraft 84-0208 has its cargo ramp extended for interior maintenance. That creates both a potential ambush position and an escape route. Major Kim nodded as she took notes. What about sightlines and communication dead zones? The tool storage area here, Elena pointed to the northern section of the hangar, is elevated approximately 4 feet above the main floor. It provides excellent overwatch of the entire facility, but more importantly, it's where we keep the emergency communication equipment. If they disable the main communications panel, the backup system is positioned to maintain contact with base security. Colonel Bradford leaned over the planning table. Captain, you're describing defensive positions, but our intelligence suggests they're planning an extraction, not an assault. How do you expect this to unfold? Elena's expression grew thoughtful as she considered the psychology of the operation from the enemy's perspective. Sir, they believe they're extracting Elena Rodriguez, aircraft mechanic. Their operational planning assumes minimal resistance from a maintenance technician who's been out of combat for 8 years. They'll likely use standard insertion tactics, fast entry, overwhelming force to establish control, quick extraction to minimize exposure time. She moved to the tactical display showing the base layout. But here's what they don't know. I've been observing their surveillance patterns for the past 6 months without realizing what I was seeing. Small inconsistencies in traffic flow, unfamiliar personnel in observation positions, communication interference that I attributed to equipment malfunction. They think they've been watching me, but I've actually been documenting their operations. Lieutenant Colonel James Parker, the base security commander, looked up from his own tactical preparations. You're saying you have intelligence on their methods? Elena nodded and moved to a computer terminal, pulling up maintenance logs that she had been keeping meticulously for years. Every day, I record weather conditions, personnel movements, equipment status, and operational schedules. What I thought was routine documentation actually contains patterns of enemy surveillance activities. She highlighted specific entries in her logs. February 8th, unusual civilian contractor activity near the eastern perimeter at 0600 hours. February 15th, telecommunications interference during routine communications check. February 22nd, unauthorized personnel observed near maintenance access roads during night shift. Major Kim studied the data with growing amazement. You've been conducting counter-surveillance without realizing it? More than that, Elena replied, pulling up additional files. I've been creating a tactical database. Every aircraft on this base, its current maintenance status, fuel load, weapons compatibility, potential operational readiness. Every personnel schedule, security rotation, response protocol timing. They think they're extracting a mechanic who happened to be a pilot 8 years ago. They're actually targeting someone who knows more about Ramstein's defensive capabilities than almost anyone on the base. The implications of Elena's revelation began to sink in among the planning team. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Hayes from Communications looked up from her equipment array. "Ma'am, are you saying that your maintenance position was actually a strategic intelligence gathering assignment?" Elena paused, considering the question carefully. No, it genuinely started as a way to stay close to aircraft while processing combat stress. But somewhere along the way, it became something more. I couldn't help analyzing everything from a tactical perspective. Force protection became automatic, operational readiness assessment became habit, threat evaluation became second nature. Colonel Bradford began to understand the full scope of what they were dealing with. "Captain, you've essentially been conducting an 8-year intelligence assessment of our entire facility. And now," Elena said, "we're going to use that intelligence to turn their extraction operation into our intelligence gathering operation." Elena moved to the detailed tactical map and began outlining her proposal. "We let them initiate the operation exactly as planned. I maintain my normal routine, arrive at Hangar 7 at 0445, begin routine maintenance." She traced the expected enemy movement patterns. But here's the difference. Every position I've identified gives us tactical advantage. The aircraft positioning provides natural cover for response teams. The communication systems I've mapped allow coordination that they won't expect. The maintenance equipment I know intimately can be converted to tactical advantages. Captain Walsh looked skeptical. "You're talking about engaging a professionally trained extraction team using aircraft maintenance equipment?" Elena smiled with the confidence of someone who'd spent years thinking exactly this type of scenario. "Captain, hydromic systems operate at 3,000 pounds per square inch. Pneumatic tools can disable personnel or equipment. Aircraft batteries can power improvised communication systems. Fuel systems can create mobility barriers. I don't just maintain these aircraft, I understand their potential as tactical platforms." She pulled up technical specifications on her computer terminal. More importantly, they're expecting to extract someone whose tactical thinking stopped in 2016. But for 8 years, I've been studying base security procedures, learning advanced maintenance techniques that have tactical applications, and observing operational patterns that give me advantages I never had as a combat pilot. Major Kim began to see the possibilities. "You're suggesting that your maintenance expertise actually makes you more dangerous now than you were as an active pilot?" "Different kind of dangerous," Elena clarified. "As a pilot, I was trained for specific mission parameters in controlled environments. As a mechanic who happens to be a former pilot, I understand the infrastructure they're operating against. I know how to disable their transportation, disrupt their communications, and create defensive advantages using equipment they don't even recognize as threatening." The planning session continued past midnight as Elena shared tactical insights that had been accumulating for years without anyone realizing their significance. Her maintenance schedules revealed optimal timing for defensive positioning. Her equipment inventories identified improvised weapons and defensive materials. Her personnel observations provided intelligence about response times and coordination capability. Lieutenant Colonel Parker coordinated with base security teams, positioning response personnel in locations that Elena identified as optimal for tactical advantage. "Ghost Rider, you realize that once this operation begins, there's no going back to being just a maintenance technician." Elena looked around the Tactical Operations Center, at the planning maps and communication equipment, at the military personnel who were now seeing her as the combat veteran she had always been, rather than the mechanic she had pretended to be. "Sir, I stopped being just a maintenance technician the moment enemy forces decided I was worth extracting. Tomorrow morning, they're going to discover that 8 years of preparation disguised as routine work has created tactical advantages they never anticipated." Colonel Bradford made the final operational decision. Operation Ghost Recovery is approved. Captain Rodriguez, you're authorized to engage hostile forces using whatever tactical advantages you've developed. All supporting units will coordinate through your command. As Elena reviewed the final operational plans, she realized that tomorrow's engagement would be unlike anything in her previous military experience.
She wouldn't be flying into enemy territory alone. She would be defending territory she knew better than anyone else, using capabilities that had been developed specifically for this moment, supported by resources that had been optimized through years of careful observation.
The quiet aircraft mechanic was about to demonstrate that 8 years of hiding had actually been 8 years of preparing for the most important tactical engagement of her career. Dawn was still an hour away when Elena entered Hangar 7, maintaining the exact routine she had followed for 8 years, while knowing that everything about this morning would be fundamentally different. The familiar weight of her tool belt felt strange now that she knew it contained more than just mechanical implements. Hidden among the standard maintenance equipment were tactical devices that had been carefully integrated during the night's preparation. The hangar appeared exactly as it always did, but Elena's trained eye could now identify the subtle modifications that had been made during the early morning hours. Captain Walsh's intelligence team had worked with supernatural precision, placing surveillance equipment and response assets in positions that looked completely natural to casual observation, but provided comprehensive coverage for the coming engagement. Elena began her routine pre-shift inspection of C-130 aircraft 91150, the same aircraft that had occupied her attention yesterday morning before the intercepted transmission had changed everything. But now, as she performed the familiar mechanical checks, she was also conducting final preparations for tactical engagement using methods that no enemy intelligence assessment could have predicted. The port engine cowling, removed for routine maintenance, concealed a sophisticated communication relay that would allow real-time coordination with response teams positioned throughout the base. The hydraulic service cart, positioned exactly where it would normally be for morning maintenance, contained emergency medical supplies and tactical equipment disguised as standard mechanical tools. Even the work lights had been modified to serve dual purposes: illumination for maintenance work and tactical lighting for engagement scenarios. Elena's earpiece, virtually invisible and designed to look like standard hearing protection equipment worn by aircraft mechanics, crackled with quiet updates from the Tactical Operations Center. Ghost Rider, this is Overwatch. Hostile vehicles identified moving toward insertion point. Estimated arrival 0428 hours. All response teams are in position and standing by. Elena continued her maintenance routine, checking fluid levels and inspecting control surfaces with the same methodical attention she had always demonstrated, but now every action was also a tactical preparation. The maintenance ladder, positioned beside the aircraft, provided elevated observation capabilities. The tool cart arrangement created natural cover positions. Even her selection of maintenance tasks had been calculated to position her in optimal defensive locations when the extraction team arrived. Overwatch, Ghost Rider, visual confirmation on aircraft systems, all tactical modifications integrated seamlessly. Beginning final positioning sequence. Through the eastern windows of the hangar, Elena could see the first hints of dawn beginning to appear on the horizon. In 15 minutes, the extraction team would discover that 8 years of intelligence gathering had failed to account for the most critical factor. Elena Rodriguez hadn't spent 8 years declining in capability. She had spent 8 years evolving into something far more dangerous than she had ever been as a combat pilot. The sound of approaching diesel engines, barely audible above the ambient noise of the base's early morning operations, indicated that hostile forces were beginning their final approach. Elena moved to the elevated tool storage area, ostensibly to retrieve specialized maintenance equipment, but actually to position herself in the Overwatch location she had identified during the night's tactical planning. From this position, Elena had complete visibility of all potential entry points, direct access to the backup communication systems, and tactical advantages that the extraction team would never suspect existed. The maintenance equipment surrounding her position included hydraulic tools capable of disabling personnel, pneumatic systems that could create barriers or weapons, and electrical systems that could disrupt enemy communications or transportation. Elena's earpiece, virtually invisible and designed to look like standard hearing protection equipment worn by aircraft mechanics, crackled with quiet updates from the Tactical Operations Center. Ghost Rider, this is Overwatch. Hostile vehicles identified moving toward insertion point. Estimated arrival 0428 hours. All response teams are in position and standing by. Elena continued her maintenance routine, checking fluid levels and inspecting control surfaces with the same methodical attention she had always demonstrated, but now every action was also a tactical preparation. The maintenance ladder positioned beside the aircraft provided elevated observation capabilities. The tool cart arrangement created natural cover positions. Even her selection of maintenance tasks had been calculated to position her in optimal defensive locations when the extraction team arrived. Overwatch, Ghost Rider, visual confirmation on aircraft systems, all tactical modifications integrated seamlessly, beginning final positioning sequence. Through the eastern windows of the hangar, Elena could see the first hints of dawn beginning to appear on the horizon. In 15 minutes, the extraction team would discover that 8 years of intelligence gathering had failed to account for the most critical factor. Elena Rodriguez hadn't spent 8 years declining in capability. She had spent 8 years evolving into something far more dangerous than she had ever been as a combat pilot. The sound of approaching diesel engines, barely audible above the ambient noise of the base's early morning operations, indicated that hostile forces were beginning their final approach. Elena moved to the elevated tool storage area, ostensibly to retrieve specialized maintenance equipment, but actually to position herself in the Overwatch location she had identified during the night's tactical planning. From this position, Elena had complete visibility of all potential entry points, direct access to the backup communication systems, and tactical advantages that the extraction team would never suspect existed. The maintenance equipment surrounding her position included hydraulic tools capable of disabling personnel, pneumatic systems that could create barriers or weapons, and electrical systems that could disrupt enemy communications or transportation. Elena's earpiece, virtually invisible and designed to look like standard hearing protection equipment worn by aircraft mechanics, crackled with quiet updates from the Tactical Operations Center. Ghost Rider, this is Overwatch. Hostile vehicles identified moving toward insertion point. Estimated arrival 0428 hours. All response teams are in position and standing by. Elena continued her maintenance routine, checking fluid levels and inspecting control surfaces with the same methodical attention she had always demonstrated, but now every action was also a tactical preparation. The maintenance ladder positioned beside the aircraft provided elevated observation capabilities. The tool cart arrangement created natural cover positions. Even her selection of maintenance tasks had been calculated to position her in optimal defensive locations when the extraction team arrived. Overwatch, Ghost Rider, visual confirmation on aircraft systems, all tactical modifications integrated seamlessly, beginning final positioning sequence. Through the eastern windows of the hangar, Elena could see the first hints of dawn beginning to appear on the horizon. In 15 minutes, the extraction team would discover that 8 years of intelligence gathering had failed to account for the most critical factor. Elena Rodriguez hadn't spent 8 years declining in capability. She had spent 8 years evolving into something far more dangerous than she had ever been as a combat pilot. The sound of approaching diesel engines, barely audible above the ambient noise of the base's early morning operations, indicated that hostile forces were beginning their final approach. Elena moved to the elevated tool storage area, ostensibly to retrieve specialized maintenance equipment, but actually to position herself in the Overwatch location she had identified during the night's tactical planning. From this position, Elena had complete visibility of all potential entry points, direct access to the backup communication systems, and tactical advantages that the extraction team would never suspect existed. All units, this is Ghost Rider. Hostile insertion commencing. Maintain positions until my command. Remember, our objective is intelligence gathering and capture, not just neutralization. Elena's transformation from maintenance technician to tactical commander was complete, but she maintained the appearance of routine morning work as the sounds of careful movement began to emerge from the eastern approach to the hangar. The extraction team was using exactly the insertion route she had predicted, approaching during the narrow window when security coverage was minimal and base personnel were transitioning between night and day shifts.
The eastern maintenance door, the primary entry point Elena had identified in her tactical analysis, began to show subtle signs of tampering. Professional lock manipulation, nearly silent movement of heavy metal doors, coordinated timing that indicates military-level training and equipment. These weren't amateur operatives. They were experienced professionals who had planned this operation with sophisticated intelligence and tactical preparation. But what they hadn't planned for was Elena's preparation. Every tactical advantage they thought they possessed, knowledge of her routine, understanding of base security patterns, assessment of her current capabilities, had been turned against them through 8 years of unconscious counter-surveillance and tactical preparation. The first hostile personnel entered the hangar with textbook precision, moving with the fluid coordination of experienced special operations forces. 3-person entry team, standard tactical formation, professional equipment and communications. They were exactly what Elena had expected based on her analysis of their surveillance patterns and operational capabilities. But as they moved through the hangar, following the approach routes that Elena had identified and prepared for, they were walking into tactical.
The psychological impact of Elena's revelation was devastating to the extraction team's tactical coordination. They had planned their operation based on engaging a target whose capabilities they had systematically underestimated, and now found themselves trapped in an environment that had been prepared for years specifically to defeat their methods. Ghost Rider, Overwatch. Hostile vehicles attempting departure from the staging area. Base security teams have interdicted all escape routes. Enemy forces are completely contained. Elena realized that the tactical engagement had reached its conclusion. The extraction team was contained, their communications compromised, their escape routes eliminated, and their operational assumptions proven completely wrong. But more importantly, the engagement had provided intelligence about enemy methods and objectives that would be valuable for protecting other former Special Operations personnel. All units, Ghost Rider. Hostile forces contained and ready for capture operations. Intelligence gathering phase complete. Enemy capabilities assessed and documented. Request immediate detention teams for prisoner processing. As base security teams moved in to complete the capture operation, Elena remained in her Overwatch position, watching the systematic conclusion of an engagement that had been 8 years in preparation. The extraction team that had come to capture an aircraft mechanic was instead being captured by Ghost Rider, using tactical advantages they had never imagined possible. The quiet maintenance technician had just demonstrated that sometimes the most dangerous tactical preparation is the kind that remains invisible until the moment it becomes absolutely decisive. 3 hours after the last member of the extraction team had been secured in detention, Elena Rodriguez stood in the same hangar where she had spent 8 years maintaining the illusion of being just another aircraft mechanic. But everything had changed. The careful anonymity she had constructed was gone forever, replaced by something far more complex and potentially more powerful. Colonel Bradford approached Elena as she supervised the restoration of the hangar to normal operations, watching her direct the removal of tactical modifications with the same methodical precision she had always applied to aircraft maintenance. The transformation back to routine operations was as carefully orchestrated as the morning's tactical engagement had been. Captain Rodriguez, Overwatch. The intelligence we gathered from the detained operatives is extraordinary. They were part of a coordinated network targeting former Special Operations personnel across multiple countries. Your engagement this morning didn't just neutralize an immediate threat, it exposed an international operation that's been hunting American veterans for years. Elena nodded, continuing to direct the systematic restoration of maintenance equipment to its normal configurations. Sir, the intelligence value was always part of the tactical calculation. Capturing rather than eliminating hostile forces provides insights that can protect other personnel who might be targeted by similar operations. But even as Elena spoke about tactical considerations, she was processing the personal implications of what had transpired. The quiet life she had built around aircraft maintenance, the anonymity that had allowed her to heal from years of combat stress, the peaceful routine that had become her identity, all of that was gone. She was no longer Elena Rodriguez. She was Ghost Rider again, whether she wanted to be or not. Master Sergeant Thompson had been observing the morning's events with a mixture of amazement and something approaching awe.
The woman he had supervised for 8 years, whose mechanical expertise he had relied upon, whose quiet professionalism he had respected, had revealed capabilities that redefined everything he thought he understood about human potential. "Elena," Thompson said, approaching her with the careful respect of someone who was still processing a complete revision of reality. "I need to ask you something that's been bothering me all morning. Did you know? When you took this assignment 8 years ago, did you know something like this might happen?" Elena paused in her equipment inspection, considering Thompson's question with the same analytical precision she applied to mechanical problems. "Thompson, honestly, no. When I requested reassignment to maintenance, I was running away from combat operations, not preparing for them. But somewhere along the way, preparation became automatic. I couldn't help analyzing everything from a tactical perspective, even when I was trying to forget that perspective existed." She gestured toward the hangar around them, now restored to its normal appearance but forever changed by the morning's events. "Every routine I developed, every system I studied, every observation, it all became tactical preparation without me realizing it. I was healing from combat stress by unconsciously preparing for combat operations." Major Kim emerged from the intelligence debriefing sessions with a tablet full of information that would reshape understanding of threats facing former special operations personnel. "Ghostwriter, the network we uncovered this morning extends across 3 continents. The detained operatives have provided intelligence about planned operations targeting at least 12 other former special ops personnel currently living under assumed identity." Elena felt the weight of responsibility that had defined her military career beginning to settle around her once again. The quiet anonymity of aircraft maintenance was ending, but in its place was emerging something that might be even more important than her previous combat flying career. "Major, recommend immediate coordination with international intelligence services to provide protective operations for identified targets. The tactical methods we used this morning can be adapted to protect other personnel who might be in similar situations." Colonel Bradford studied Elena with the calculating assessment of a senior officer recognizing exceptional capabilities when he saw them. "Captain Rodriguez, I'm authorized to offer you several options for your continued service. You can return to active flight status, accept a staff position coordinating protective operations for at-risk veterans, or design and implement a new program combining your maintenance expertise with your tactical capabilities." Elena realized that she was facing the same type of career decision that had brought her to Ramstein 8 years ago, but from a completely different perspective. 8 years ago, she had been exhausted by combat operations and seeking refuge in routine maintenance work. Now, she was someone whose unique combination of tactical expertise and technical knowledge had created capabilities that didn't exist anywhere else in military service. "Sir, I'd like to propose a different approach," Elena said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had spent the morning proving that unconventional solutions could be extraordinarily effective. "Rather than choosing between pilot, staff officer, or technician, what if we created something new? A program that combines all 3 capabilities to provide protective services and tactical consultation for at-risk military personnel." The concept Elena was proposing represented a fundamental innovation in military service structure. Instead of traditional career paths that required choosing between technical expertise and tactical operations, she was suggesting an integrated approach that maximized both capabilities simultaneously. "You're talking about institutionalizing what you've been doing here for 8 years, Colonel Bradford observed, creating a formal program that combines maintenance expertise, tactical cooperation, and operational readiness into a new type of military specialty." Elena nodded, warming to the possibilities she was describing. "Sir, there are thousands of former special operations personnel who have transitioned to civilian careers or support roles while retaining tactical capabilities that could be activated if necessary." Staff Sergeant Chen, who had worked alongside Elena for years without recognizing her true background, approached the group with a question that reflected what many base personnel were thinking. "Ma'am, I've been working next to you for 4 years, and I never suspected anything unusual about your background. How do you hide something like that for 8 years?" Elena smiled, recognizing the genuine curiosity in Chen's question. "Chen, the secret wasn't hiding my capabilities. The secret was finding genuine satisfaction in maintenance work while allowing my tactical skills to evolve naturally. I wasn't pretending to be a mechanic. I actually became a mechanic. But I was also remaining ghostwriter at the same time."
She gestured toward the aircraft they had been maintaining together for years. Every technical skill you watched me develop was real. Every mechanical problem we solved together was genuine professional development. But it was also tactical preparation that I didn't fully recognize until this morning. The afternoon debriefing sessions revealed the full scope of the intelligence windfall that Elena's tactical preparation had produced. The captured operatives had provided information about funding sources, operational methods, target selection criteria, and planned operations that would allow protective measures for dozens of at-risk veterans. But perhaps more importantly, Elena's demonstration that 8 years of apparent civilian work could actually be tactical preparation had implications for how military service and veteran transition programs might be reconceptualized entirely. As the day concluded, Elena stood alone in Hangar 7, surrounded by the aircraft she had maintained with such careful attention for 8 years. Tomorrow, everything will be different. Her identity as a quiet maintenance technician was gone forever, replaced by recognition as someone whose unique combination of capabilities had created tactical advantages that no conventional military training could have produced. Elena Rodriguez had spent 8 years being dismissed as just a mechanic while unconsciously preparing for the most important tactical engagement of her career. The extraction team that had come to capture her had instead discovered that sometimes the most dangerous person is the one whose true capabilities remain invisible until the moment they become absolutely necessary. Ghost Rider had emerged from 8 years of hiding not weakened by the experience, but transformed into something more formidable than she had ever been during her years of active combat flying. The quiet aircraft mechanic had become a tactical innovator whose methods would reshape how military service, veteran transition, and protective operations were understood for years to come. And in the end, the small scar above her eyebrow, the one everyone had assumed came from a maintenance accident, had become the symbol of something far more significant. Proof that true expertise never disappears. It simply evolves into forms that become visible only when circumstances demand the revelation of capabilities that most people never suspected existed. The weeks following the extraction attempt brought changes to Ramstein Air Base that no one could have anticipated. Elena's tactical innovation had attracted attention from the highest levels of military command, and within days, representatives from Special Operations Command, Air Force Intelligence, and the Pentagon were arriving to study what was already being called the Rodriguez Method. Brigadier General Patricia Hawkins from Air Force Special Operations Command conducted the most comprehensive debriefing Elena had experienced since her original Special Operations training 15 years earlier. The general's questions went far beyond the morning's tactical engagement, exploring the philosophical and practical implications of Elena's 8-year evolution from pilot to mechanic to tactical innovator. Captain Rodriguez, what you've demonstrated challenges fundamental assumptions about how we prepare military personnel for both active service and veteran transition, General Hawkins explained during their third day of sessions. Your capability development during supposed downtime suggests we may be wasting enormous amounts of human potential by treating technical assignments as separate from tactical readiness. Elena had been thinking about similar questions since the engagement concluded. General, I think the key insight is that tactical thinking doesn't disappear when you change assignments. It adapts to new environments. My maintenance work wasn't separate from tactical preparation. It became a different form of tactical preparation that was actually more comprehensive than anything I had achieved during active flight operations. The general leaned forward with interest. Explain what you mean by more comprehensive. Elena moved to the tactical display that had become a permanent fixture in the debriefing room. Ma'am, as a combat pilot, my tactical thinking was constrained by aircraft capabilities, mission parameters, and operational timelines. As a maintenance technician, I had to understand every system that makes tactical operations possible: infrastructure, logistics, communications, mechanical reliability, resource allocation, personnel coordination. She traced connections on the display showing the integrated systems she had learned to manipulate during the morning's engagement. The result was tactical thinking that encompasses not just mission execution, but mission enablement at the infrastructure level. Instead of just knowing how to fly through a tactical environment, I learned how to create and control tactical environments. General Hawkins was taking detailed notes, recognizing implications that extended far beyond Elena's individual case. You're describing a fundamental expansion of tactical capabilities that occurred because you were placed in a position that required understanding systems rather than just operating within them. Elena nodded, warming to the analysis. Exactly, ma'am. And I believe there are hundreds, maybe thousands of former special operations personnel in similar positions throughout military and civilian infrastructure who have undergone similar capability evolution without anyone recognizing what was happening. This observation led to the most significant development emerging from Elena's case: the creation of Project Sleeper Cell, a comprehensive assessment of former special operations personnel who had transitioned to technical, administrative, or civilian positions. The project's mission was to identify individuals whose apparent career transitions had actually resulted in enhanced tactical capabilities that could be activated for protective operations. Dr. Marcus Webb, a military psychologist specializing in veteran transition studies, was assigned to conduct psychological profiles of Elena and similar cases. His preliminary findings were revolutionary for understanding how military expertise evolves in civilian contexts. Dr. Webb explained during a briefing to senior command staff, "Captain Rodriguez, what you've demonstrated challenges fundamental assumptions about how we prepare military personnel for both active service and veteran transition. Your capability development during supposed downtime suggests we may be wasting enormous amounts of human potential by treating technical assignments as separate from tactical readiness." Elena had been thinking about similar questions since the engagement concluded. "General, I think the key insight is that tactical thinking doesn't disappear when you change assignments. It adapts to new environments. My maintenance work wasn't separate from tactical preparation. It became a different form of tactical preparation that was actually more comprehensive than anything I had achieved during active flight operations." The general leaned forward with interest. "Explain what you mean by more comprehensive." Elena moved to the tactical display that had become a permanent fixture in the debriefing room. "Ma'am, as a combat pilot, my tactical thinking was constrained by aircraft capabilities, mission parameters, and operational timelines. As a maintenance technician, I had to understand every system that makes tactical operations possible: infrastructure, logistics, communications, mechanical reliability, resource allocation, personnel coordination." She traced connections on the display, showing the integrated systems she had learned to manipulate during the morning's engagement. The result was tactical thinking that encompasses not just mission execution, but mission enablement at the infrastructure level. Instead of just knowing how to fly through a tactical environment, I learned how to create and control tactical environments. General Hawkins was taking detailed notes, recognizing implications that extended far beyond Elena's individual case. You're describing a fundamental expansion of tactical capabilities that occurred because you were placed in a position that required understanding systems rather than just operating within them. Elena nodded, warming to the analysis. "Exactly, ma'am. And I believe there are hundreds, maybe thousands of former special operations personnel in similar positions throughout military and civilian infrastructure who have undergone similar capability evolution without anyone recognizing what was happening." This observation led to the most significant development emerging from Elena's case: the creation of Project Sleeper Cell, a comprehensive assessment of former special operations personnel who had transitioned to technical, administrative, or civilian positions. The project's mission was to identify individuals whose apparent career transitions had actually resulted in enhanced tactical capabilities that could be activated for protective operations. Dr. Marcus Webb, a military psychologist specializing in veteran transition studies, was assigned to conduct psychological profiles of Elena and similar cases. His preliminary findings were revolutionary for understanding how military expertise evolves in civilian contexts. Dr. Webb explained during a briefing to senior command staff. Captain Rodriguez, what you've demonstrated challenges fundamental assumptions about how we prepare military personnel for both active service and veteran transition. Your capability development during supposed downtime suggests we may be wasting enormous amounts of human potential by treating technical assignments as separate from tactical readiness. Elena had been thinking about similar questions since the engagement concluded. General, I think the key insight is that tactical thinking doesn't disappear when you change assignments. It adapts to new environments. My maintenance work wasn't separate from tactical preparation. It became a different form of tactical preparation that was actually more comprehensive than anything I had achieved during active flight operations. The general leaned forward with interest. Explain what you mean by more comprehensive. Elena moved to the tactical display that had become a permanent fixture in the debriefing room. Ma'am, as a combat pilot, my tactical thinking was constrained by aircraft capabilities, mission parameters, and operational timelines.
Major Thompson, who had supervised Elena's maintenance work for 8 years, was among the first personnel selected for technical tactical specialist training. Major Rodriguez, I still can't believe I supervised Ghost Rider for 8 years without knowing it. But now I understand that you weren't hiding your capabilities from me. You were developing new capabilities that didn't exist before. Elena's response reflected her understanding of how her experience applied to broader questions of human potential and professional development. Thompson, I think what we learned is that expertise doesn't have to be compartmentalized. Technical mastery and tactical thinking can enhance each other in ways that create capabilities neither could achieve alone. You didn't supervise Ghost Rider, you supervised someone who was becoming something better than Ghost Rider. The program Elena developed attracted personnel from across military specialties who recognized that her model offered opportunities for professional growth that conventional career paths couldn't provide. Engineers, communication specialists, logistics coordinators, intelligence analysts, and medical personnel applied for technical tactical specialist training, seeking to combine their technical expertise with tactical capabilities. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Hayes, who had worked communications during the morning's engagement, became one of Elena's first success stories in the new program. Major Rodriguez, the integration training has completely changed how I approach communications planning. Instead of just managing information flow, I now design communication systems that can be converted to tactical advantages if circumstances require it. Elena's training methods emphasized that technical-tactical integration wasn't about preparing for combat, it was about developing a comprehensive understanding of systems that could be adapted to meet any challenge, whether routine operations, emergency response, or tactical engagement. The goal, Elena explained to a group of senior military educators, isn't to turn technicians into warriors. The goal is to develop professionals who understand their technical expertise so completely that they can adapt it to solve any problem, including problems that don't exist yet. The ripple effects of Elena's case extended beyond military applications into civilian veteran services, corporate security, and emergency response training. Her demonstration that apparent career transitions could actually be advanced capability development influenced how organizations assessed and utilized personnel who had military backgrounds. Dr. Amanda Foster from the Department of Veterans Affairs implemented Elena's principles in veteran employment programs, helping former military personnel recognize that their civilian careers could be forms of continued professional development rather than departures from military expertise. Major Rodriguez's case proves that military training doesn't end when military service ends, Dr. Foster explained at a National Veterans Conference. What we're learning is that veterans in civilian careers are often developing enhanced versions of their military capabilities that could be valuable for national security, emergency response, and community protection. Elena's apartment off base, which had been Spartan and functional during her years as a maintenance technician, now reflected her evolved identity. The civilian aviation magazines remained, but they were joined by technical journals on advanced manufacturing, tactical planning publications, and research papers on systems integration. The vintage aircraft photos shared wall space with images from her recent training programs and letters from international colleagues implementing Rodriguez protocols. But perhaps most significantly, Elena had added a new photo to her collection, an image from the morning's tactical engagement showing Hangar 7 transformed into the tactical environment she had spent 8 years unconsciously preparing. The photo captured not just a successful operation, but proof that human potential could evolve in ways that conventional assessment never suspected. As Elena reflected on her transformation from quiet maintenance technician to tactical innovator, she realized that her story represented something larger than individual career development. Her 8 years of supposed hiding had actually been 8 years of becoming someone more capable than she had ever been during her original military service. The extraction team that had come to capture just a mechanic had instead encountered someone whose capabilities represented the future of military service, veteran transition, and human potential development. Elena Rodriguez had proven that sometimes the most important innovations come from people who appear to be doing routine work while actually revolutionizing entire fields of human expertise. And the small scar above her eyebrow, which had started this entire revelation, now served as a reminder that visible signs of capability are often the least important indicators of what people can actually achieve when circumstances require the full expression of their potential. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.